Hi guys, welcome to Extra Talk. Today we have our North American friends, Ajax fans, Alex, all the way from Boston, and of course, David, all the way from
Canada.
Ottawa, exactly. I always forget that, but no, I won't forget it.
Canada. It's a big country.
No, of course, I knew you were from Canada. I knew that. Guys, so it's late here. It's the sun is shining probably there, or not? Or is it cold still?
It's Canada, man. It's always cold.
All right, guys, international break. We have time to discuss a couple of topics, One of the things I want to touch upon today is about the contract situation, how Ajax deals with player contracts. There's a lot of rumors, transfer talks, most recently about Gravenberch, Ryan Gravenberch. We know his situation. He has a contract till 2023, but negotiations have stopped with Ajax, so basically heavily linked with Bayern Munich. There are other clubs involved, but it seems like he's interested to move to Munich as well. Let's talk about Gravenberch, that case first. And from there, we will talk more about how Ajax deals with player contracts and whether there are things we can improve, because we know that there are a couple of players leaving for free this summer. And it's something we should avoid as Ajax because we need the money, basically, Alex, looking at the Gravenberch case, what's your overall view on this whole situation? Not only contract-wise, but do you think also maybe it's a good time for him to leave, or do you think it's too soon? How do you see that?
Yeah, so it's a complicated question, but your last point, I agree. I think it is a good time for him to leave.
Okay.
And I'll give a couple of reasons for that. So I guess just backtracking, thinking about Ryan Gravenberch's career at Ajax, he came onto the scene at 15, 16 years old.
You mean the first team? You mean the first team?
The first team, yeah. I think he made his cup debut at 16.
Youngest debut. Yeah, 16. Yeah, correct.
Exactly. So he's 19 now. We've known what he's about, right? Technically brilliant, can hit a great shot from outside. We saw that recently against Cambuur. So really, if you look at this from a couple of years ago, you think, okay, this guy, once he's 20, 21, he's going to be the star. We can build a team around him, phenomenal player. Like I said, he has all these great talents, but of course, we don't live in a perfect world. He's had he's had a little bit of a stumble this year, some dips in form here and there. So from Ajax's perspective, I think it probably does make sense, especially when you consider his contract situation going out next year. So like you said, Juan, we need the money. So really, what you can get, you might as well take it. I think the 15 million from Bayern guaranteed is probably a little bit low, but it's better than nothing. So I think from the club's perspective, that's why I think it makes sense. From Ryan's perspective, there has been maybe a bit of stagnation. I'm of the opinion that he'd probably it'd be better for his development to stay in the Netherlands for another year or two, really turn into that star player that we all know he can be. But it seems like maybe there's a bit of a mental block, something going on where he needs a change of scenery. So those are my two main reasons why I think it makes sense for him to leave.
Interesting.
Yeah. So from
go ahead. Yeah.
So from my perspective, again, I also did evaluate it from the player's point of view and Ajax's point of view. And when it comes to Gravenberch, I think it's a move too big, too soon. I don't see how he's possibly going to get into a midfield that has Joshua Kimmich, Jamal Musiala, Muller, very, very, very strong players in what is arguably maybe the best team in the world. So again, I agree with Alex that, I think from a developmental point of view, I think, staying 1 to 2 years more is probably, and again, we are biased as Ajax fans, probably the best thing for his career path. And, it seems like he didn't listen to Brian Brobby, who, is all of a sudden wanting to come back to Ajax after being frustrated and not really getting a chance at what is arguably, well, I would say a much lesser team. And then also from Ajax's point of view, again, I think Alex is largely correct that this is a transfer that is not the end of the world from a personnel standpoint. That position, even before bringing in extra players with that sum of money, is, covered by Mohamed Kudus, who, I'm a little bit skeptical on. Klaassen has the potential to play there. I don't think he's great in that position. Berghuis, the few times he has played there has looked excellent. Kenneth Taylor, and that's all before, spending some money on a replacement, and, just the amount that's been floated, 15 million, like Alex said, was the latest. I don't think that's anywhere near enough. I would quite frankly be very disappointed if it was anything under 25.
Guaranteed, you mean?
Well, I mean, again, it depends so much because sometimes teams put in extremely easy to reach, variables and bonuses and stuff like that. But, if the final sum to us was 25 and we got that all within the span of a few years, I would be fine with that. And again, as Alex has said, there's an immensely talented player there. But I don't think anybody in the current Ajax 11, with the exception of Blind, who, I didn't really have high hopes for as left back this year, has disappointed me more. And that's not because he's been terrible. I think he's actually been quite good recently. It's just, there's been a bit of stagnation there. I don't think you can say that he's significantly better than he was last year. So again, from the player's point of view, I think he should probably be staying. From our point of view, I don't dislike it at all for the right sum.
Yeah, I want to move a little bit into the player's situation, the player's mind, right? Because you guys touched upon Brobbey, right? I think it's a bit different though. Brobbey was not even a regular in the first team and he already left. So it's a little bit of a different situation. I don't want to, relate to that for Gravenberch. But for Ryan, as Alex also said, look, he made his debut when he was 16, but it took a little bit longer for him to really become a regular. This is his second full season. He's been a regular starter for the team. Do you think that maybe, because we know he has Raiola as an agent, and Raiola will come back in this episode, but the thing I'm trying to say is they did go into a negotiation with Ajax, so probably Gravenberch had the intention to stay longer, perhaps. So what happens in that, contract negotiations, that because it seems like repeatedly, not only with Gravenberch, we will touch upon other players as well. Mazraoui is a perfect case as well. Why is it that Ajax cannot extend these contracts, or the contract of Gravenberch more specifically, and that now we are forced to sell him? From a player's perspective, he had 2 full seasons, but I mean, everybody sees that he's not ready for a club like Bayern Munich. With all due respect, he has a lot of potential. He's a great player, still room to grow, can be a star. I totally agree. But shouldn't you be a star at Ajax before you move to a club like Bayern Munich? Anyone?
I mean, again, I completely agree with what you're saying. I don't see how he's possibly going to be making, more time at Bayern, or even a similar amount of time at Bayern, when he's moving into, a team that is, absolutely stacked. So from his point of view, I mean, and again, he is actually, if I'm not mistaken, and you might know more about this because your connections with the Dutch media and stuff like that, but he is making quite a bit of money at Ajax as well. Yeah. It's not like he's getting paid, like 3 or something like that, which for Ajax is quite good. Yeah. So again, it's possible that Raiola, wanted to go into negotiations just for show and ask for an absolutely outrageous sum of money, and then he can point to this and say, oh, well, we tried, Ajax just said no. So, without being a fly on the wall in the back room, it's hard to know exactly what happened. But again, I am of the belief that yes, he should probably be staying. There are things in his game that are excellent, and there are things that I would say quite a few things in his game that need to be ironed out before he makes that dream move.
Okay. All right, Alex, one question to you. I mean, what David said, what I said, what is strange to me at times is that also with Mazraoui, we will touch upon that a bit later. When they start going into negotiations, in the start, you always hear the same thing. You always hear like, this is my club. I love this club. I want to extend the contract, and I want Ajax to earn some money and this and that. All the right things. You always hear the right things, And then a few months later, negotiations stop. And it seems like it has to do with money. I mean, honestly, I think it's a money issue. We'll touch upon that a little bit deeper as well later. But do you think like do you think the players in general, like Gravenberch, do you think they have something to say? Do you think, or do you feel like they're being too much taken care of by Raiola, or in his opinion, or in his case, I'm sorry, his dad, you know, and that they're so maybe naive, thinking, okay, they know what to do, I'll just stick. I mean, I cannot, they always, you know, like when they're asked about this, they always say, yeah, my agent is taking care of it. Yeah, my agent is taking care of it. You know, they let me know how things go. Is that really how it works? Don't players have a voice in this?
It's a good question. And I mean, like Dave said, I'm also not a fly on the wall. So it's, you know, it's hard for me to say for sure. I think you're right. It's largely about money, right? So, and this is something that we'll touch on later, I'm sure, but you get all these players, you mentioned Robbie, who wasn't even in the first team necessarily. And he was convinced that, you know, you got to make this move. What if you get injured? What if, God forbid, there's some sort of situation like what happened with Api Nouri a few years ago, where suddenly you're obviously, hopefully not as drastic of a situation, but let's say you get a long-term injury, you're not able to make any more money as a player. So in that sense, I think I would agree with the player like Robbie, who says, okay, I'll listen to what Raiola says, I'll do what my agent says. If he wants me to move to Leipzig or whatever, so be it. But when you look at the comments that Robbie has made since he's come back, it seems like he maybe wasn't so interested in the move in the first place. Of course, there were reasons that he came back. He wasn't getting playing time. Nagelsmann left, I want to say, even before Robbie joined up with the squad. But perhaps there was a bit of, his
message is different than a year ago.
Exactly. And like I said, maybe that was just circumstantial, but you could say he could have potentially just gone along with what Raiola wanted, while deep down in his heart, he would have preferred to stay and develop at Ajax. I don't know, but it's, you know, it's speculation, so it's hard to say.
Look, we're talking about Gravenberch. Let's move to other players as well. We know this summer might be an overhaul, but basically we have to, there's so many players we know that might leave, but looking at the ones that are leaving for free, we know that Mazraoui is leaving for free. We know that Onana is leaving for free. We know that Labiat is leaving for free. We know that Danilo is leaving for free. I mean, look, of course, Mazraoui, Onana, different cases than Danilo, Labiat, but still, these players represent a value, you know. They are very important to Ajax, especially for us being in a small league. The most important things for us is the Champions League, and of course, transfers. So do you guys think like we mismanaged a little bit this situation into this summer, having so many players leaving on the free, David?
So, I mean, again, it's hard to make a blanket statement where you say yes or no. So when I was thinking about this, I kind of looked into each individual, you know, transfer, you know, independently. And the thing is, with the Onana case, if you had told me 18 months ago that, you know, he would be banned for doping and we wouldn't be getting a transfer fee, I would have said this is a bad dream, or, you know, this is strange. So it's a very unique case. I think, quite frankly, that the team or Ajax really tried to make the most of a bad situation, because they tried to sell him to Lyon, and you know, it looked like something was going to go through. It was for a fairly small amount of money, and then Onana's entourage says, no. Again, this is just what I've heard in the media. There's a lot of finger pointing, but Onana's entourage basically says, no, there's not enough money involved. We're not going to do that. So, you know, I don't think it's fair to really point the finger at Ajax in the Onana case and say, you know, they mismanaged this, because something totally out of left field happened and they tried their best to adapt, and unfortunately it didn't work out. You know, in the case of, you know, Labiat, I mean, you know, no offense to the player, but I think, you know, if he was put in the shop window, any offers would have been so small and, you know, not worth it, because, you know, quite frankly, he's not a great player. So I think Ajax probably, you know, maybe they considered it in the summer and they looked back on things and they said, hey, last year he actually was a half decent player. You know, do we want him starting in big matches? Absolutely not. But, you know, against small teams in the cup as an injury reserve, there was some value there. And, you know, I know a lot of people don't love Labiat. I think the biggest mistake was paying 7 million for a very mediocre player. You know, but, you know, I don't really fault Ajax for trying to, you know, hang on to him for one more year and hoping that he could replicate, you know, the decent use that he had last year.
Yeah.
Danilo?
Yeah, 1 minute. About Labiat, I just want to react on that, and maybe Alex wants to react on that too. Specifically on Labiat, I know that last year, Ajax was willing or positive to the fact that if there will be an offer for him, they would sell him. But the problem is that allegedly, the reports say his salary is so big that the clubs that come in and want him, they're not willing to pay that salary. So he's like, you know what? Fine by me. I'll just sit it out, until the end of the season, which he has every right to do. But then we touch upon the salary, which we'll come back to later as well, because that's also maybe an issue that's happening among players. But we will touch upon that later. And the second thing I wanted to say about Labiat as well is that he has every right to do so. But what you see happening, and maybe Ten Hag will not agree with me on this, because there was a question not too long ago about why is Labiat still in the team? He's not adding any value, and why is Univar not being in the squad, at least on the bench? And then Ten Hag said Labiat had more impact in the games that he played, not this year, of course, but in the past. And Univar is not there yet in terms of being able to impact this team. And it shocked a lot of Ajax fans, basically. We even tweeted about that. But that's the thing, you keep players that don't contribute, you pay a decent salary for them, and they block basically, perhaps Ten Hag sees it differently, but in my view, we're blocking a little bit of youth in that sense. It's something we have to avoid. Alex, do you feel the same way?
Yeah, totally. I agree, especially with the Univar case, because when you look at Labiat, Dave, I think you mentioned he gets paid a lot of money, and even just going back to the Gravenberch contract situation, you could double his salary if you just never bought Labiat in the first place, right? Or you increase Kudus's salary, give him more chances in the first team, Univar more chances in the first team. So yeah, I'm totally in agreement with you on that. Maybe, I don't know if you wanted to touch on this later, but I think this comes to a big issue that a lot of fans, including myself, have with Erik ten Hag, because he is not rotating the squad at all. Whether that feeds into the club's contract negotiations, that's, like I said, I'm not sure, but yeah, I don't know. Did you want to touch on Ten Hag, or maybe
we will touch upon that, because it also influences the whole thing about signing a contract or not signing a contract, for the youth. But we will touch upon that. I just want David to finish what he was saying, because I think he wanted to discuss Danilo as well.
Yeah. So again, in the case of Danilo, that's actually the one I would arguably attribute the most blame to Ajax for, because you had a player who last year had, was a bit of an uneven season, but was quite good for SC Twente. I think he scored something like 17 goals. I think the first time I was on with you guys back in, I think it was July, I said, this is a decent player, but he seems to fit in more of a counter-attacking team. So why didn't we sell high on him? That's kind of the one that bothers me the most. And look, we're not, I'm not thinking that we could have got $10 million for him, or 10 million euros or something, maybe, in the low single digits or something like that. But that was one I was actually very surprised that he started the season with us. And quite frankly, I mean, he's shown, no disrespect to the player, that he's not really an Ajax player. So for that one, I would absolutely attribute some blame for that, because in hindsight, I think Ajax should have, cashed in on him. Do we want to talk about the Noose one, or? Because I have some opinions on that as well.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
Mazraoui. So, and then continuing just with Mazraoui, which was like the last player that we mentioned. So that one for me stings the most. But the thing is, I'm going to play club lawyer a little bit and say, Ajax last year was looking at a player who was good when he played, but the thing is he was injured, and I looked at it, about 20 games of the last season and a half. The reason I say season and a half, because Corona cut short the season, one of the seasons before. Yeah. So you had a player who they basically, I think, thought, okay, we're going to see how the first few games go. We expect he's going to do well. We're hoping he's going to be healthy. And if he, does well, we'll offer him a contract. But the thing is, I think Mazraoui played so well that because for me, I would say after maybe like the first 10 games, he was maybe Ajax's best player. I don't know if that's a commonly held opinion, but he was outstanding to start the beginning of the season, and has been very.
I remember we played Liverpool in the Champions League, and I think it was a home game, He was the best player. He was the best player. It was right before he got that eye injury, in around, when was it?
Right. But I'm also talking about this season as well.
This season without a question. But the thing is, Dave, and Alex, please also, if you want to jump in. The thing is, for me, I don't blame Mazraoui for leaving at all, because I think Ajax made a mistake here. You never go into the last year and try to negotiate a contract, because that's a power shift. You give players already have a lot of power in today's, transfers, but going into the last year and then willing to upgrade and say to him, yes, we want to keep you more than that. It's not the way you communicate to a player that has been an academy player even. And that's something I want to touch upon as well. Maybe we can shift also, and you guys can come back to the Mazraoui case as well in this one. But the question I want to ask you, right, in general, maybe a controversial view, but we have been getting a lot of players in, right? Berghuis, Haller, these kind of players. Also, even before that, Tadic, Blind. And don't get me wrong, they're proving themselves to be worthy of the team, and they really add value to the team in their own ways. So that's happening, that's fine. But at the same time, what you're seeing, we have such a big squad. And one of the things of Ajax, and we've had this discussed, this season a couple of times with other people about the youth and getting their chances and these kind of things. But what happens now is that these players, these academy players, are looking at it, especially this year, and saying, you know what, if I get another contract negotiations round with Ajax, I'm not going to be that quickly, enthusiastic just to sign it. Look at Taylor. He has a 2-year contract left. I thought this year he would have much more playing time. Univar, his contract runs out next year in 2023. Do you think Univar is going to sign a new contract? If he does, that would be amazing. But he has every right to be very, how do you call that?
Frustrated.
And second thoughts. Yeah, being critical about the fact that Ajax wants to sign him. Because how many chances did he get this season? And I'm talking about these two specific cases, but also for Mazraoui, don't forget, Keizer was the one that gave him a contract. He was one of the last players that was still an amateur. Everybody around him had a professional contract. He was still coming with a bus or whatever he was coming to. And he wanted to show himself to Ajax. He could have gone to other clubs and signed with other clubs. He didn't. He wanted to prove himself. Keizer saw something in him, gave him a contract. And always when he has an interview, even recently, he said that thanks to Keizer, I was able to sign a contract. He believed in me because he was always in the youth. They were always like doubting whether he was good enough. So he always made it just barely to the next round, and that's how he always went. So everybody was very like, we don't know. And now look at him. And that's the thing I also want to say. And it's a very long discussion and also a very long intro from my side. So forgive me for that. But shouldn't we also value our youth more? Because the way we're going now, it's always been the case that Ajax values the youth. But because now we have the money to spend, we're getting players in. Don't forget, we're paying Haller, Tadic, Berghuis. These are our top earners, And maybe Gravenberch, coming back to Gravenberch, he's thinking like, listen, I'm playing for 2 years now. I made my debut when I was 16. I'm an academy player. I'm proving myself to this team. Why can I not get that amount of money? Same thinking goes for Mazraoui. Why should other players coming from outside earn that much? And of course, you can contemplate and discuss whether they have the same value in terms of what they bring to the team. But my question to you is, shouldn't we be more caring for our youth players? Also showing them, maybe paying them a loyalty bonus or something like that, there's no difference between the players that we get in and the youth players. It seems that way. Again, I'm speculating, but from my perspective, Mazraoui should have, looking at last year, even though he was injured, there's a case to be made. He's been injured for a long time, but you don't go into the last year of contract negotiations because even though you have second thoughts, it's almost a done deal that Mazraoui, and I think Mazraoui, I'm pretty sure that it has something to do with that as well. That Ajax always has been very difficult to him in terms of, granting him a contract, believing in him and these kind of things. So I don't blame him for leaving, but that's a question. That's a very big question about the youth getting chances and at the same time being valued. Alex, do you want to go first?
Yeah. I like what you said there, Juan. I think just to briefly touch on Mazraoui, I think he's our best player. Maybe that's a kind of a cold take or a hot take, but
general
I
or
think
this year? In general or this year?
I mean, perhaps not in general. I think maybe you could say Tadic is maybe our most technically advanced player. But this year, on form this year, I'd say 100%. Mazraoui has been our best player, at least in the Eredivisie. So that's just, for me to agree with Dave that we really should have handled this situation a lot better, and agree with you, of course, because we shouldn't have let the contract run down so soon to the end of the year. But yeah, touching on the youth, I think you mentioned Taylor, you mentioned Unumvar. I think these are players who at 18, 19 years old, you would expect in an Ajax team, especially with how much talent they have, you would expect them to get more chances than they're granted this year. Like I said, that has a lot to do with Ten Hag, I think. Maybe when Overmars was still here, it had a little bit to do with him. Like you said, this has to do with the transfer policy too. When you get Tadic, Blind, Berghuis, all these brilliant players coming in.
Kudus. Yeah.
And yeah, the younger players from outside the academy as well. It is difficult to see how that path opens up for a lot of them. I will even point to Keon Fitzjim, who's still at Young Ajax. I believe he still hasn't even made his debut yet. Of course, he's only 18, but by my reckoning, he's probably the most talented player in the Toekomst. So he should be getting game time, and if he's not getting game time, at least Taylor and Unumvar should be getting it. Van Axel Dongen's another good example. So yeah, I agree. I think we're not giving enough chances to them. Just we can just end it at that, and we can talk about why they're not getting those chances. Maybe it's a bit of a mental thing. I know Unumvar, there were maybe some questions about is he up for it, is he not? But when you look at the players, the end of the end of the statement is, you need to play them, and if they decide to leave for game time, I don't blame them.
David, let me add something to this, right? Look, I'm being critical, and on this channel, a lot of people are critical, especially on this topic. But again, let me go the other way around. Ten Hag always says the best players play, which I also accept, and I also understand that. As a coach, you want to win games, and you always choose your best players, your best team, your best squad, your starting 11. I totally have empathy and sympathy for that idea. However, what I also then what I'm going to say is that the other side of this, basically, the other side of the coin is that you shouldn't be surprised. Also, fans, we have to start realizing that if we do this the way Ten Hag does, or any other coach for that matter, we shouldn't be like surprised or upset when young players say, you know what, no, I'm not going to sign, I'm going to leave, I'm going to play somewhere else. Or you see it differently, David?
I mean, so I kind of have two thoughts on that. First of all, I don't think it's necessarily well, it's unfortunate because it goes against Ajax's traditional values. And when I talk to people that are kind of casual fans of football, don't know a ton about Ajax, they say, man, I respect Ajax so much because they always use players from their own academy, and they're not going and buying $50 million players and stuff like that. So we are getting away from that identity, which is a shame. But it also speaks to the quality of, again, Alex was saying, the quality over the past, since I've been a fan, so for a little over 10 years, I mean, I had to sit through watching youth products like Leslie Dessau, Jody Lukoki, Ruben Liron, people like that. And, all of a sudden, guys like Unumvar, who I think is maybe a bit of a flawed player, he's having a very productive season in the second division, all of a sudden can't get a game. And I can kind of understand that frustration, because why is Ten Hag, starting Licha Martinez and Anthony against amateurs in the cup? Like maybe they're trying to send like a message, and in those games I think they did make a switch at halftime. But why are you not? But like why? I mean, these are amateurs, and the Dutch second division is one level higher, and Young Ajax is a pretty decent team for the Dutch second division. Why are they not playing? I don't understand. It might change.
yeah, I think by now it has to do with the mindset of Ten Hag.
100%, 100. And the thing is, I think that, maybe a new coach, is going to change that. I hope they do, because again, he is so stubborn. Look, I'm a pretty big Ten Hag supporter, but he is so stubborn when it comes to that stuff. It is disappointing. And then the other argument I've been thinking about is, why are we not making use of like loans, to lower tier Eredivisie sides? Would it be very hard for us to have loaned Univar to a team like Eagles or a team like Cambuur, where he can learn at a higher level? Because, he had a good season last year. I don't understand why we're letting him play in the second division again, when I don't know how much he's possibly going to learn at that level. When, last summer or in January, we could have sent him to a team, in the same league as us.
Yeah.
Do you have any comments on that? I'm curious as to, because
I don't know if Alex wants to react first.
No, yeah, I'm in almost complete agreement with you there, David. I think you mentioned Go Ahead Eagles, and this is a point I wanted to bring up. The squad rotation doesn't need to be a bad thing. It doesn't need to mean that we're dropping more points than we are, because the Go Ahead Eagles match, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we played our full strength 11, and we still couldn't get a result. So there's, or maybe, one or two players substituted, but there is and I know a lot of Ajax fans have mentioned this, there's a lot of fatigue in the team. You could even argue that's why we didn't perform as well as we really should have against Benfica. That's why we're out. So I think if you have Kudu starting more games, you bring Univar in, you bring all of these different players in, they don't even need to start. They can just come in at the 60-minute mark once we're 3-0 ahead, or hopefully. But then you get these games where we have the Champions League in the midweek, we're playing Go Ahead. I know we had a couple of other recent matches in the Eredivisie where we either dropped 3 points, dropped 2 points. And, Aller was playing, Tadic was playing, Antony, all of our star players, right? Not saying that they all played poorly in those games, but that's the argument right there. It's, you need to be taking Antony out for Kudus, or Antony out for Univar, or, wherever you want. Eric can figure out the tactics of it, right? But you need to give these guys a rest, basically. And the way you give them a rest isn't by bringing in Labiad or other Darami outside players. You give the youth a chance. So that's my take on that.
Yeah, Alex, you're making a good point. And I want to touch upon also what David said earlier. Why don't we, if you see those young players doing well at young Ajax and also not getting a chance in the first team, why don't we, let them go to another Eredivisie team? I think the problem with that, we've done that a few times before, but it's a bit hard because not all teams play the same way. And we've also seen that sometimes when we let a player go on loan, after a while he doesn't play anymore, which is even more detrimental for his development, because at least at Ajax you can let him play in the young Ajax team, which is, of course, it's a second division, but the thing is, for them it's still better to play with young Ajax than not play with an Eredivisie team. So I think Ajax had bad experiences with that, not always. We had also good experiences. Daley Blind went to Groningen, by the way.
I think Vertonghen too.
Exactly. So these are the good examples, but there are many that went. I think Danilo did well also. Went to Twente. But I think maybe I should look more into that, because after a while, like if you look at Univar, I think after this year, to have him next year, I mean, depending what happens with his contract situation, all these kind of things. But if they manage to extend his contract, and even maybe for Taylor, I mean, I don't know if they will be happy for another year at young Ajax, I mean, in terms of development, it doesn't help them, And again, we're talking about the rotation and all these kind of things, but it always, I mean, this topic today is all about the contracts, and it impacts the contract negotiations. And that's what basically it's all about. And my question is, how should Ajax go about this? Because like I said, Ten Hag can always say, look, I'm here to get results. I'm here to play the best team. So what do you want from me, basically? Why you guys keep giving me a hard time? He's not saying that, but perhaps he's thinking that. So what's the trick here, David?
So I mean, just before getting to that, I know this whole conversation is about how Ajax is maybe mismanaging some assets.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe, but I also do want to point out before people say I'm being too negative on the board and stuff like that. We have had some surprising renewals in recent, years too. Tagliafico, in winter 2020,
True.
he stayed quite a bit longer than I would have thought, and I think he would have thought too. Also, Alvarez was a bit of a surprise, and Martinez as well.
So okay, very good. What's the pattern here? What do you see happening here?
Well, I think they're being more proactive in signing people to long-term deals because they want to avoid a situation where, you're being forced to sell someone, or, you're letting them go on a free, or you're having a situation in which, because of maybe Ajax's new rule where, if you have 1 year, you're basically going to be sold, they're trying to avoid a situation in which, they have to sell tons of players all at once. So, I think maybe this is
why. Yeah, okay, but why is it going so easily for the Alvarez, for Martinez, for these type of players, and why couldn't we replicate this for our own?
I don't know. Maybe there's good Latin food in Amsterdam. I have no idea. but no. In all honesty, I mean, that's something that is very particular to the player. And you mentioned a good point with Mazraoui, where he has maybe felt a little bit wronged by Ajax in the past.
Again, wait, before I get hate on the comments, this is speculation, of course, but from an outsider, that's how I see it. So that's
I don't think you're wrong. I don't think you're wrong. I mean, yeah, like you said, this was someone I didn't know he was arriving by bus and stuff like that. But no, I had seen the same where he was always kind of doubt, and he always had to prove himself, and he was basically asked to change positions at one point and stuff like that. So why do some players want to renew and other players don't? I mean, that's a very, very particular question to each player's motivation.
Yeah.
So again, it's a bit hard to answer.
You look, it's very hard also to make a case about everyone and put them all together and just say, okay, this is it. I know that. But the fact of the matter is, in the summer, we have 4 players.
Yeah.
I mean, if you add up what we can get for them, easily 70, 80 million. That's like a Champions League season, a successful Champions League season like this year. It's a lot of money that we're just missing out on. That's my point. We don't have that luxury, especially in the COVID that we just came out of, to have players leave us like this. And again, Onana case is totally different from Mazraoui case, totally different from Labiat case, totally different from Danilo case. So I respect that. But I think somewhere we're doing something not entirely right, or missing out, or maybe with some players Ajax purposely, maybe for Danilo, they already knew that this contract will not be extended, so maybe it was a conscious decision to keep him a year and see how it goes. And maybe during the year they said, like, no, we're not going to extend the contract, let him go on a free. So maybe that.
Well, I think that's what happened with Mazraoui, because I thought again, speculation, but they wanted to see how he did. And the thing is, he played so well that he basically thought to himself, whoa, I can, I have a chance to leave on a free, make tons of money by playing at a better team. And with the way I've been playing this season, I have a good chance of actually starting and being an impact player on a better team. So, I don't particularly blame the club, because they took a wait and see approach on a player who was chronically injured. I mean, again, I can ask you guys the question is, I could have asked you in the summer, are you comfortable spending $4 million a season on a player who's missed, 40% of the league games in the last few years? And a lot of people might not have said yes.
Let me flip it also a little bit. Let me flip what you're saying a little bit and ask this to Alex. Maybe, why don't we, I mean, you see it sometimes with other teams, also in other areas of sports. And I'm not saying that's the way we should do our business, but in terms of Mazraoui being a youth product, he has been injured a lot. But when he plays, when he's fit, you see his brilliance, basically. You see how good he can be. And we saw that already last year. Yeah, so we're talking specifically about last season. When he got injured on his eye, that was unlucky. It's not something it's not an injury, a muscle injury or these kind of things. He just got a ball on his eye, and it was something very particular, very difficult. He couldn't do anything. He had to wait. Why cannot Ajax in that particular moment show a vote of confidence, appreciation, and say, listen, we're happy with you. We want to continue with you. Would you be open for a contract? Don't you think he'll be much more inclined to say yes?
Yeah, definitely. Especially coming off of an injury, like you said, because that goes back to an earlier comment I think I made. These players, especially the young players, they're looking for that guarantee. So when you see players like I think it was Radon a few years ago moving to Chelsea, or players in the youth academy who haven't even had a chance, they moved to Arsenal, Chelsea. They might rot on the bench, they probably will, but they're at least getting more money. And so when you look at Mazraoui, of course, not a youth player anymore, certainly a different case. Yeah, I agree. I think it makes sense from his perspective, what he's doing. Now, what I would do if I were Ajax, like you said, maybe offer a 1-year extension. I think it makes more sense to, of course, every player is different, but maybe there's some sort of policy where, okay, regardless of injuries, regardless of whatever off the field situations, if a player is showing improvement and they haven't had a contract renewal in over a year, you sit down and you have a contract discussion. End of story. Whether something comes of that, maybe something does, maybe something doesn't. I think there should be more proactivity, and maybe that's what we're getting at. That we need to be more proactive, not only with Mazraoui and players like him, but with the youth players too. With Univar, you've had a phenomenal season in the second division. Here's a 50% pay rise. It doesn't guarantee that he's going to be a star in the first team anytime soon, but it does guarantee that he'll be more likely to stay, and that will also extend the expiration of the contract. And I'll just make one more quick point on Mazraoui. I can also flip this on its head as well, because you see Mazraoui coming into this season, he has 1 year left on his contract. When I looked at the squad, especially once we got going in the group stage of the Champions League, I thought, we have a chance of going as far as we did in 2019. We could have gone to the semifinals. We could have even made it to the final. I don't think that's outrageous to speculate. And when you have someone like Mazraoui, who has shown that he's effective in these European games, he, like I said, at least in my opinion, he's one of, if not our most talented player this season. I would prefer to keep him on the team instead of say sell him a year before his contract expires for maybe 15, 20 million. I don't know, maybe that's a lot of money, but of course, it's all hypothetical, but if we had gone very far in the Champions League and Mazraoui stayed fit, was in form, maybe even scored a couple of goals like he did against Benfica in the previous Champions League campaign, then that's really a win-win. And if he leaves on a free, he leaves on a free, but he left having contributed to 2 major Champions League runs. So maybe the finances don't work out like that. But at least from my perspective, I can see why Ajax might have just let this whole thing play out. And it looks like it's going to end in a not so good fashion, but that's just the randomness of the game. And of course, the Onana situation, entirely random. Like Dave said, there's really no way to control that. So yeah.
Let me throw a fish line here, a very far one. It's going, way up, like very far, and maybe I'll get something out of it, maybe not, depending on your reactions. But the mistake we made against Benfica, everybody know partly Onana's mistake. We cannot blame, I had a big discussion with Sahbi about that. He blamed Onana very harsh about it being his mistake. I said, yeah, it's his mistake, but at the same time, let's be honest, this guy didn't play for quite some time. Even when he came back to Ajax, he was second goalkeeper behind Remco Pasveer, which I totally understand, by the way. But why is this happening? It's all because of what happened, not only with the doping, but from that are the contract negotiations. So what you see, this is very, very far-fetched perhaps, but do you think having players in our team, Onana is a highlight of that, but also Mazraoui, we have players that are in their last year contract. Do you think they can give still that 100%? Or do you think they're a little bit more, like maybe it's subconscious? Don't get me wrong. I don't think they purposely intend to sabotage or not be 100% because the coach can see that. but do you think that's the preferred situation when you're trying to reach the best you can throughout the season?
So I kind of want to have a bit of a go at this.
I'm gonna bite my head off. Go ahead.
No. I was thinking about it too. But I mean, the major difference is that, again, it is not official, but it's a terribly kept secret, I guess, is that Onana has actually signed for another team. Apparently, he's on his way to Inter. So, that definitely crossed my mind. I'm like, is his mind already, shopping in Milan and stuff like that? But the thing is, and I have to commend Noose because he has given 110%. Again, for me, he is not the best player we've had this season, but I agree with Alex, definitely up there. I've been immensely impressed. He's also fighting for a contract too, so, and I think he's played so well that he's basically put him into the position of moving to, maybe at the beginning of last season, you would have said, okay, Leicester or Dortmund or something. I don't, if he moved to Barcelona or if he moved to Bayern, I think he would be a very good contributor there.
No, but David, just one thing. I totally agree with what you're saying. I'm not doubting that whatsoever about his intentions or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The thing I'm trying to say is, if he had extended, hypothetically, he would have been the first goalkeeper, not Renko Pasveer, which means he had more playing time, which means he had more rhythm, also being the captain of the back line with Martinez and Timber and everything like that. More unlikely, I'm not ruling it out, but more unlikely that such a mistake would have happened. Again, a lot of ifs, but it all comes down also with the contract situation. You understand my point?
Yeah, I mean, if you're saying that like he would have been the first keeper and therefore more, had more game time and had a chance.
Because let's be clear about this, Overmars didn't want him in the squad anymore. After the summer, out of courtesy, he was allowed to train with young Ajax. But it was because of the situation with Stekelenburg, Ten Hag pushing and actually talking into, like Overmars saying, listen, we need the best players, even though what happened, he didn't want to extend, he didn't want to be sold, like being a little bit of a, how do you call it in a nice way, being a little bit of a hassle for us. But at the end of the day, Ten Hag brought him back, but he didn't have any rhythm whatsoever. And the only rhythm he got prior to the Benfica game was Africa Cup. That's it. Let's be honest. And maybe one or two games, I don't know, in the cup or something like that, but nothing really specific. And don't forget, I mean, we sometimes rule out how important it is to be, I mean, you see it with other type of sports as well. If you're out for a little bit, a couple of months, it has such a huge impact on your performance. Same goes for Onana. How incredible he is as a goalkeeper. I totally agree. But again, very specific about Onana, contract situation. Now let's finalize this whole thing. We're talking about contracts and we talked about a lot of things, rotations. We talked about the Gravenberch case. We talked about specific cases, the youth, these kind of things, having chances. There was an interview in December with the Dutch newspaper, and Van der Sar touched upon Onana, but in general, he said, maybe we have to become a little bit more firm, like stricter when it comes to contracts of players. Because we all know they have a gentleman agreement with players like Tagliafico. If you do well for Ajax, you play 3-4 years. Ajax is willing to, lower the transfer fee, not ask outrageous amount. And just out of courtesy, out of thank you, say, okay, you deserve that chance to go to that club if you want to. Now they're saying, okay, we still might do the gentleman agreement. That's what we want. But if they don't sign, then what they want to do, and this week, again, another Dutch media outlet came out with this, that they're thinking about becoming more strict. And if they don't sign, we sell them. I mean, at least a year before their contract runs out. It's a bit of a harsh take. But do you think we have the power to do so? Because at the end of the day, again, we tried to sell Onana last year. He didn't want to. So can we enforce something like that, Alex?
I think we could with most players, right? So Onana is a particular case. He's, in my opinion, the best goalkeeper the Eredivisie has seen in years, a long time. He's a phenomenal player when he's on his game. So you don't have as much power with him, especially as you approach that 1 year mark. That's why, going back to my most recent suggestion, I think it makes sense to be a lot more proactive when these players don't get to that level, before they're at that level. When Onana came in, what was it, right after, maybe before Silesen left and he took over, he was still, no one knew who he was, this Cameroonian goalkeeper from Barcelona. Obviously, he took it to the next level very quickly, and I can't recall what that sort of what the contract negotiations were like, what the dates were, but just to use that as a kind of a hypothetical, you want to be renewing that contract, if not every year, at least every year and a half, every 2 years, as they progress, so that by the time Onana gets to the level where he's at right now, or at least where he was a couple of years ago, he has a 4-year contract, maybe making a lot of money, and you can finance that perfectly well if you don't buy players like Labiad, the people who are really soaking up the wage budget and the transfer budget, like you mentioned, Juan. So yeah, I agree with the idea of these reports, whether they're true or not, that Ajax is looking to be more proactive with this. But I don't necessarily think that means you need to sell them. I think maybe you can look at it in the reverse fashion, where we're really just constantly renewing contracts. Like I said, financially, whether that makes sense, I'm not in that position, so it's hard for me to say, but it makes a lot more sense than losing these 2 players on a free transfer.
But even with that, it's a little bit difficult to enforce. You know why, Alex? In my opinion, David, you can jump in as well if you want. The thing is that we all know if you're a good player or exceptional player, like Onana's case, but also in Mazraoui, look, we know that sooner or later they want to go to a bigger league, they want to go to another team. We respect that as Ajax. We are aware of that, and we want that as well, because we want them to develop further, and we want to also receive money from that, and we want to promote our youth or get other players, and that's the way the cycle goes. So we cannot keep renewing, because I think maximum with a player, I mean, ideally it should be 3, 4, 5 years. Look at Doni, look at Ziyech. These are, like, for me, the examples, the perfect examples. Frankie and De Ligt were exceptional, like higher 1%, these are very unique players. So I understand after 1-2 years being sold to bigger clubs right away. But some other players, like, I don't think Gravenberch is in that category. So he needs another 1 year or 2 years, and that would be perfect for him set up to leave. So we cannot keep, I don't think we can keep extending contracts. But again, it all comes down to, and it's very difficult. There are unique cases. You don't know what goes on behind the scenes, what they think. But Mazraoui, in his case, he said that at the start of the year, he wanted to stay, but he mentioned, he was quite honest actually, that it's about appreciation, being appreciated by the club. Financially, he said that, but also something else. It was a little bit a hidden message, but basically what he was saying is that he felt like he was treated differently compared to the other players in the team. That's what he said. Nobody jumped on that. People blaming, a lot of fans blaming Mazraoui for leaving on a free. But why is he thinking that? Because he was referring, I know what he was referring to. Blind, Tadic, these kind of players always stay. They never got substituted. If he makes a mistake, it happened before, Ten Hag will get him out very quickly. It seemed like he was, of course, guys, I don't want to blame or be negative or these kind of things, but I'm pointing about certain things and mentioning that he wanted to stay longer, but Ajax could not give him what he wanted financially, but also the other thing. And the thing I also wanted to touch upon finally, and this is part of it, do you guys think, because look, Ajax is more than just a football club, right? It's also, they spend a lot of time investing in youth, not only on the field, but also in terms of education. Don't you guys think, I don't know if they do that. I don't think they do. Don't you think they have to be educated in terms of financially educated, in terms of what happens to them when they become a professional, what Ajax intends for them, how the contracts, how they see it, in which echelon you come, after 1 year, 2 years, where you can get at, etc., and how Ajax wants you to develop, and at what time, in a perfect scenario, at what time they want to sell you. These kind of things, shouldn't it be enforced or giving to these players when they're 16 or 17, so they understand how Ajax sees it. So they also understand when they get to that level or that stage in their life as a player, that they would have more understanding when having negotiations with Ajax. And also maybe becoming more active and not leaving everything to Raiola. Or am I being too naive now? Or maybe I'm too naive, but shouldn't we do something there?
Well, I mean, again, it's very hard to say without knowing like just what happens inside, the constants and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I mean, we're still a very attractive option to, youth players and stuff like that. There's not people that, well, maybe there are, but, we just signed a huge Belgian talent, Bonita, and he didn't seem to have any problems with, oh, is Ajax going to let me go? Is there going to be a difficult contract situation in a few years and stuff like that? So we're still a very attractive option for that type of stuff. And then the other thing, also, again, just looking at kind of some of our players and when I think they're probably likely to leave. I think maybe we're learning from a little bit of the mistakes of Mazraoui and Robbie and stuff like that, because I don't foresee a situation where, we're going to have to sell Timber early, or he's going to walk out on a free and stuff like that, and same with Alvarez and Licha. So I think, in terms of, the fine, I think, I think that it's a bit, overblown, this discussion, and there's no structural issue at Ajax with mismanaging, assets from the beginning of their time at the team or anything like that.
Yeah. You think this is a one-off this season?
I think that this season, and again, the Robbie situation, so maybe like the last 18 months is a little bit peculiar. And again, I was just looking at other teams and stuff like that. And Porto, who I think is a quite similar team to Ajax insofar as, not one of the biggest teams in the world, but still a very attractive team. I mean, they've had issues with having people leave on frees. Chelsea is losing 3/4 of their defense, so it happens to big teams too. Manchester City lost Eric Garcia. So, it happened.
Look, comparing to Porto is fine, but we cannot compare to City because the amount of money it doesn't hurt them, it does hurt us. So it's not.
Well, that's fair enough. But I guess what I'm trying to say is these things happen, and it's impossible to say we're going to create a blanket policy that's going to do this and nobody is ever going to leave on a free. Look, it happens. And again, if you look at like the last 10 years, it actually hasn't happened that often as far as I can think,
Okay. Are you more concerned about the topic we discussed about the youth not getting their chances, and maybe that's, or is this also too far-fetched for you?
No, I wouldn't say it's too far-fetched. I just don't understand why we don't loan players to smaller teams. And I understand that, like, the play styles and stuff aren't similar. I say this half in jest, but maybe we need to buy a team in Belgium or something like that, put in a coach and have them play we want to and just use it the way we want to and just, send our players there to learn or something like that. But, I don't have major concerns about, the personnel issues at Ajax. I think some of these things happen and they happen with all teams. Okay,
Alex, your verdict. Are you on my side or on David's side?
Well, I mean,
I don't.
I know.
But do you think it's also a unique situation, like David is saying, or do you think there's maybe a little bit more to it?
So, okay, there is more to it. I don't necessarily. I think both of you guys make great points. I think when you look at Ajax positioned among European clubs, we're a big European club, one of the biggest, I would say, financially. Of course, the biggest in the Netherlands. But when you look at the disparity between, I think I mentioned Chelsea and Arsenal as two examples earlier, they have you can't even comprehend the amount of financial pull that they have compared to us. So when you compare that to the fact that Ajax have a massive pool of brilliantly talented players, we talked about Univar, Taylor, whether they're 20, I think Mazraoui is 23, 24, all the way down to 16, 17 years old. European clubs are watching them and they're waiting for that moment to pounce, which we'll see with Mazraoui this summer. So that is to say, I think there is a structural element to this question. So there's always going to be an urge for these players to leave. There's always going to be a motivation for them not to extend their contracts, right? So it's going to be something that plagues Ajax for a long time. I would argue maybe even more so in the coming years as football becomes even more hyper centralized around specifically the Premier League. So I agree. I don't think it's a problem that's going to go away. But how to solve it? I mean, that's the $1 million question, right? It's all about trying your best to keep your players happy. As Ten Hag is finding out in a somewhat hard way, squad building is a science, and it's a very difficult science. I mentioned how Mazraoui, maybe it would have made sense to keep him and let him go on a free if that means good Champions League performances. So there's always a contradiction between wanting to sell players but wanting to keep players. Of course, I don't need to tell you that. But yeah, that's kind of my whole take. Is this issue needs to be seen from the European level of football finance, and we're not in a position where it's going to go away anytime soon. It's really a matter of making small tweaks here and there, I think, which one of them I would argue is not buying many players unless you're talking about Tadic, Blind, real impact veteran players. Everyone else, bring them in through the youth academy, buy up some quality AZ players. We could have let Tagliafico go 2 years ago for, I'm sure, maybe 20, 30 million when he was at the top of his game, playing a lot of games, and brought Vindal in from AZ for 5 million. So there are ways that we can manage this, but I'm not sure it's a one-off discussion. I think we're going to be having this discussion for years to come.
And what role can Ajax play, in the sense that can we do anything better, or is this just the best we can do? I mean, very quickly, briefly, both of you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say quickly, I think this is maybe not the best we can do, but it's difficult, right? And it's very random, like with the Onana situation. But Dave touched upon Martinez, specifically with a contract extension, a few other players as well that we've been able to extend. So I think we're doing a pretty good job. If we had beaten Benfica, maybe this conversation would have a different tone to it, right? So of course you can't separate the.
Do you think so?
I mean, I think so, because like I said, if we go up against, I don't know, Manchester City, someone else in the quarterfinals, maybe we get to the semifinals. It's important that you have Onana there and Mazraoui there and other players who we could have sold for more money a year or so ago. Maybe getting to the Champions League final. I'm not sure about the finances, but maybe we would have made that money back in television revenue. So that, yeah.
Yeah, if it means maximizing our performance, it's a risk we are ready to take.
Yeah.
Okay. David, anything to add?
No, not really. I mean, I would say that like the losing to Benfica obviously stings from a sporting point of view, but also from a financial point of view, because that's millions that couldn't have been invested in the squad. It also shows that, hey, Ajax, we're up there with the top 8 in Europe, so that's obviously an attractive factor to anybody who's looking to extend their contract as well. But again, I do think the last 18 months have been a bit peculiar with the Onana situation and, the Mazraoui one, which again, I do think is the club deserves some blame on that, maybe not entirely. And I do think that we are also learning from these mistakes by offering extensions to players. So, I wouldn't say I'm absolutely not concerned. To be fair, at the youth level, we did lose Rijkaard, who went to Dortmund, who is apparently an excellent player. That one could really end up biting us in the butt. But I'm not overly concerned about this. I think Ajax is decent at doing this, and it seems like, based on some of the extensions in the last 18 months, there's an effort to be extending people's contracts too. So.
Yeah, my closing argument would be the following. So we see that 4 players are leaving on the free, the ones we mentioned before. The difficulty with that is that we're not getting anything in return, but at the same time, there will be 4 slots open for us to get players in. So this also might be a situation, because I would not I would not think Ajax is going to buy 4 players. So maybe there will be more spots open for youth players for next season.